Did you know that some of the biggest games ever made started out as mods, modifications for pre-existing games? And I do mean like actually the most successful games of all time. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. AAA studios rarely take giant risks on total new concepts, and the indie game dev scene has only recently become more massive. So a ton of our biggest game innovations had to happen in the modding world. Today we're going to take a look at 10 of the most important game mods and how they came to be. Starting off at number 10, we have kind of a dark horse of the modern military tactical FPS genre. That is Insurgency Modern Infantry Combat. Canadian Army vet Andrew Spearin started developing this Half-Life mod back in 2002 and eventually teamed up with Red Orchestra's co-creator Jeremy Blum. They switched to the Half-Life 2 engine and launched the mod back in 2007. And if you're keeping track at home, 2007 was a big year for FPS games. BioShock, Halo 3, Crysis, Team Fortress 2, Stalker, and of course a little old game called Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. COD of course blew the lid off the multiplayer FPS scene, but it left a big space for fans looking for something that felt a little more tactical. And Insurgency's dedication to realism and also being firmly grounded in the real-world Iraq War gave it a sense of authenticity and immersion that few other games could match. It stood apart from games like COD and Battlefield with a more mature and grounded experience that frankly led to it offering more intense feeling situations. It attracted a huge audience and was downloaded over 1 million times in the first week that it launched. The mod was eventually remade as a commercial game simply titled Insurgency that released back in 2014. That game was one of the initial success stories of Steam's early access program and was successful enough to secure funding for a sequel, Insurgency Sandstorm. Today, Sandstorm is still played and loved, and although it's not quite as monstrous a success as some of the other games on this list, it's one of the most important games to help kick off the now crazy scene for indie-developed tactical FPSs. Now, number 9 is one of those mods that helped spawn an entire genre. Killing Floor was one of the very first co-op zombie horde survival games ever. It was a total conversion mod developed by Alex Quick for Unreal Tournament 2004, and the mod launched in 2005. It was fast-paced, intense, immersive, and tactical, and was basically a progenitor to games like Left 4 Dead and even Call of Duty Zombies. It launched 3 years before either of those games and essentially invented the formula that they would put their own twist on. The premise was simple: shoot lots of zombies, gear up between waves, and then shoot more zombies. Killing Floor's mod version offered a solid roster of real-world weapons. All the various enemies had distinct behaviors and attack mechanics that gave every horde sort of its own unique personality. And on top of the multiplayer co-op component, Killing Floor also had a pretty cohesive and impressive single-player campaign. Now, shortly after the mod launched, developers from Tripwire Interactive, which was basically a group of modders turned game devs who made Red Orchestra, reached out about porting Killing Floor into their version of Unreal Engine 2. Quick initially declined the offer and continued maintaining Killing Floor on his own. However, the mod quickly reached saturation and started declining in popularity. He then decided to negotiate with Tripwire, who then took over the mod as its primary developer in early 2009. And in March of that same year, Tripwire released the first retail build of Killing Floor on Steam, and it blew up almost immediately. It launched as the top-selling game on Steam of that month, and eventually went on to sell over 3 million copies. Killing Floor was so successful that it established Tripwire as one of the premier indie studios of the late 2000s and early 2010s, and they built on the first game's success with Killing Floor 2 in 2014, and they released Killing Floor 3 back in 2025. So many zombie horde shooters and even just zombie co-op games in general might have never seen the light of day if it weren't for Killing Floor basically blazing that trail for them. Now, this next game is responsible for essentially launching the walking sim genre into mainstream gaming. Dear Esther is a short Half-Life 2 mod released back in 2008, and it was developed by a collective of college students that formed a small indie studio called The Chinese Room. And despite its humble graphics and level design, this mod expanded the scope of what we consider to even be a game. The big hook with Dear Esther is that there's effectively no actual gameplay. The game is set on a deserted island off the coast of Scotland. You just walk on a linear path as a narrator reads a series of letters to his wife Esther, who passed away in a car accident. Each area of the island has its own bits of narration, and the gameplay actually cycles through different sections of music and narration for each sequence. Now, in 2012, the Chinese Room remastered Dear Esther and released it as a commercial game. Later, they ported it to Unity and re-released it as the Landmark Edition. The commercial release of Dear Esther was a massive upgrade and was basically the version of the game that propelled it from an influential but obscure indie mod into a genre-defining cult hit. It helped popularize the entire walking sim genre, leading to fantastic games like Firewatch, Soma, Journey, The Exit 8, Gone Home, and The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. But what sets it apart from many of those games that came after it was its commitment to just being a walking sim. There's no puzzles to solve or items to interact with. You literally just walk. At most, your flashlight will turn on to illuminate some of the game's darker caves. Playing the Landmark Edition, which is the current definitive edition of Dear Esther, it's still incredible how realistic the blowing wind sounds can be and the set of space that the game can convey. It shows that what we typically think of as a game or gameplay can really just be more of an experience by itself if it wants to be. At number 7, we have something that could, in a way, be considered a walking sim, but it's one that helped make meta commentary and liminal spaces much more mainstream. This is the Stanley Parable. It began as a Half-Life 2 mod created by Davey Redden, and it released in 2011. On the surface, it looks simple. You played as Stanley, an office worker who suddenly realizes that all of his co-workers have vanished. And as you walk around, a British narrator calmly starts describing everything that Stanley did in the past tense. The game is built around player choice, or more specifically, the illusion of player choice. The narrator constantly encourages you to follow instructions. Every time you deviate from the preordained path, like going right instead of left, or down a set of stairs instead of up, you discover a new deviation that takes you deeper down the rabbit hole. And what seems like a normal office building unravels into a space that defies the laws of reality. The mod became such a word-of-mouth success that it was expanded into a full commercial release in 2013 by Galactic Cafe. That version added new content, improved visuals, more endings, and an even stronger sense of absurdity. Then in 2022, it got an expanded re-release called the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, which somehow managed to satirize the idea of remaster sequels and deluxe editions, while also being one of the best examples of all three. Today, you can see the Stanley Parable's DNA in all kinds of games. The Magic Circle blends Stanley's commentary on player agency with a psychedelic acid trip of an FPS game. Superliminal applied a similar blend of narration and nonsensical level design to the liminal space exploration game. Basically, for anyone that's played the Stanley Parable, any game with an unreliable narrator that came out after 2011 feels like it exists in the shadow of Stanley. Now, number 6 is less of a game and more of a giant toy box that somehow became one of the most important sandbox games ever made, Garry's Mod. Originally created by Garry Newman as a Half-Life 2 mod in 2004, Garry's Mod was basically a physics playground. You could pose characters, build weird contraptions, create chaotic-looking movies, and generally just break the source engine in every way imaginable. It was a great time. But over time, it evolved far beyond that. Thanks to scripting, user-created servers, and a ridiculously creative modding community, Garry's Mod became a platform for countless game modes and social experiences. Roleplay servers, Trouble in Terrorist Town, Prop Hunt, murder mystery modes. Half the stuff people remember most about Garry's Mod was made possible because the game let players turn it into whatever they wanted it to be. That freedom made it feel almost like the gaming equivalent of Lego. For some players, it was a machinima tool. For others, it was a social hub. For a huge number of people, it was their introduction into emergent gameplay and community-driven content. Entire YouTube careers were built on Garry's mod videos, and for a while, it felt like every week some new game mode or meme was being born from within it. The mod was released commercially on Steam in 2006, and it became one of the biggest PC sandbox games of all time. What especially impressed is how long it stayed relevant. Long after many source mods faded away, Garry's mod kept thriving because it wasn't tied to one genre or specific experience. It was a toolkit, a playground, and a game all at once. And its influence is massive. Games like Rust, which Garry Newman later went on to create, carry some of that same spirit of emergent systems and player chaos. And more broadly, Garry's mod helped normalize the idea of community-made content being the whole point of a game and not just an extra feature. Game platforms like Roblox and Fortnite probably wouldn't be what they are today if it weren't for Garry's mod. At number 5, we've got a game that defined class-based shooters before that was even a term. We're talking about Team Fortress. The original Team Fortress started as a mod for Quake back in 1996, if you can believe it, and it quickly stood out from the crowd because it wasn't just another deathmatch mod. It was built around teamwork, specialized roles, and objective-based content. Sure, that might sound normal now, but at the time it was genuinely revolutionary. Most shooters in the mid-90s were just about speed, reflexes, and racking up those kills. Team Fortress added structure. Suddenly you had classes with specific purposes. Scouts moved fast, medics supported teammates, engineers built defenses, soldiers held choke points, and spies could infiltrate enemy lines. Instead of everyone just doing the same thing, players had to coordinate and fill those roles. The mod became so successful that Valve hired its creators, and eventually the concept evolved into Team Fortress Classic for the original Half-Life in 1999. Valve released a sequel with Team Fortress 2 in 2007. The game became a cultural phenomenon in its own right and is still played by thousands of people every day, 30 years after the original mod. And Team Fortress's influences extend far beyond its own series. Class-based design, objective-driven team play, asymmetrical character roles, these ideas helped shape everything from hero shooters to tactical multiplayer games for decades afterwards. You can draw a line from Team Fortress to Overwatch to Rainbow Six and to basically any multiplayer shooter where team composition matters. Number 4 is a mod that completely took over the internet and redefined what people wanted from survival games. That is DayZ. Created by Dean Hall and released in 2012 as a mod for Arma 2, DayZ dropped players into a giant post-Soviet wasteland full of zombies, limited resources, and other players who were often much more dangerous than the actual infected. And that was the hook. The zombies were secondary to that tension. Paranoia and emergent storytelling made DayZ's sandbox possible. Every can of food mattered. Every gunshot in the distance made you freeze. Every stranger you met could become your ally or rob you blind and leave you for dead. It created a level of social unpredictability that was absolutely unmatched at the time and has become a core staple of modern titles like Ark Raiders, Escape from Tarkov, and countless others. The mod became so popular that Arma 2 sales surged years after release because people were buying the game just to play DayZ. It also kickstarted the survival shooter craze. Games like Rust, H1Z1, Scum, and a whole wave of open world survival titles owe a massive debt to DayZ. Plus, it helped shape what would eventually become the Battle Royale genre. A standalone version of DayZ released in 2013, and the rest is history. At number 3, we've got a mod for a mod that took DayZ and focused all that gameplay down to a King of the Hill deathmatch experience called PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Developed by Brendan Green, he was inspired by films like Battle Royale and wanted to create a game mode where a large number of players would drop onto a map, scavenge for gear, and fight until only one person or team remained. The shrinking play zone, the scramble for loot, the long stretches of tension broken by sudden firefights, the constant pressure to move, it all combined into a format that was wildly watchable and endlessly replayable. Green's mod work got enough attention that he was eventually hired by Krafton to develop a standalone version, and in 2017, PUBG launched into early access. It absolutely detonated on impact, becoming one of the most defining multiplayer games of its era, smashing Steam player count records and and turning the Battle Royale concept from a niche mod into the hottest trend in the entire industry for years to come. And once PUBG broke through, everybody followed. Fortnite pivoted hard into Battle Royale and became the phenomenon that it is today. Call of Duty Warzone, Apex Legends, and countless others entered the arena as well. And for several years, Battle Royale was the only thing to talk about in multiplayer gaming. At number 2, we have one of the most important mods in the history of video games, full stop. 2003's Dota, aka Defense of the Ancients, started as a custom map for Warcraft 3. It grew out of some earlier ideas from StarCraft's custom map scene and Aeon of Strife, but it was Dota that fully crystallized the formula into something genre-defining. The concept was brilliant. 2 teams, 3 lanes, waves of AI units, a roster of unique heroes with wildly different abilities, leveling, gold, items, map control, and team fights that could swing an entire match. It combined elements of RTS design with character-based progression and intense competitive play. The result was a wild new game concept, and people absolutely loved it. Dota spread like wildfire among PC players. Entire communities formed around it. Eventually, Valve hired one of the key figures behind Dota development, IceFrog, and released Dota 2 in 2013. Meanwhile, Riot, founded in part by people who had been involved in the broader Dota scene, launched League of Legends and made the formula even more mainstream. Today, those games helped create the MOBA genre as we know it and turned it into one of the biggest competitive scenes in gaming history. Now at number 1, there could really only be one choice: Counter-Strike, the gold standard, the king of competitive shooters, the mod that became a game that became the pillar of PC gaming. Originally created as a Half-Life mod by Min Guzman Lee and Jess Cliff in 1999, Counter-Strike took the basic FPS framework and injected it with a level of tactical intensity that was absolutely transformative. Terrorist versus counter-terrorist with 1 life per round. You'd buy your weapon at the start, you had the option to complete the objective or kill the enemy team, no respawning mid-round, which was a crazy concept for the time, no chaos for the sake of chaos, every moment in the match mattered. This structure created a completely new type of shooter experience. It was slower, methodical, and way more punishing than arena shooters that had previously dominated the FPS scene. Precision, communication, map knowledge, economic management, and team coordination were everything in this game. Winning a round felt earned. Clutching a 1v3 could feel legendary. Even landing a crisp headshot with an AK or an AWP just felt incredibly satisfying. The mod spread at light speed through LAN cafes, college dorms, and online communities. Valve quickly recognized what they had and acquired the rights, releasing Counter-Strike as a standalone retail game in 2000. From there, it only got bigger. Counter-Strike 1.6 became a foundational esports title. Source kept the game alive for the new era. Global Offensive turned it into one of the biggest competitive games in the world, and Counter-Strike 2 has carried that legacy on into modern day, making it even bigger. Counter-Strike is the clearest example of a mod not just becoming a successful game, but becoming one of the most important games ever made. It helped define online competitive play. It shaped esports. It influenced tactical shooters for decades, and unlike a lot of trends that come and go, Counter-Strike really never stopped mattering. On top of that, Valve has held on to the game's roots as a mod, buying maps that community members make and endlessly refining them while preserving the things that make them iconic. To this day, the bulk of Counter-Strike's maps have their origins in a community-made experience, and even some of its earliest maps are still in rotation for millions of players every day. In many ways, the lasting success of these maps is a reflection of the game itself. Counter-Strike is basically the immortal game, a constant in every competitive gamer's life, and something that may even outlive all of us. Now, if you want an even deeper look at the impact of Counter-Strike, check out my video about the death of an entire arena shooter genre. Counter-Strike played a huge role in shifting the entire gaming landscape away from arena shooters, and it's pretty interesting to see what actually ended up happening to that genre in the long run. Check out that video here. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you next time. This is LevelCap, signing off.